it's Tessa with Hip Over 50. Today I'm going to talk to you about real estate or estate agency in the UK, primarily in England. I live in England. The laws are a little different between the countries. Scotland, for example, laws are quite different from, offer to contract closing than they are to England. So I'm only going to refer here today to what is specific to England. The one main thing I want you to take away from this is that in England and probably the UK, the term caveat emptor still applies to property purchases. And caveat emptor means buyer beware. So you really have to know your facts and terms before you get into something, and make sure that you have good representation to guide you through the whole process. That's kind of been done away with in the US. It used to be caveat emptor, but now laws sort of favor, transparency between both seller and buyer. And there is a lot more, kind of a safety net for property transactions in the US, I think, than there is here. But let's get on with the show. So one of the top terms that you will come across here in the UK is the term vendor. Vendor means that is the seller of the property. Then a vendee is the buyer of the property. An estate agent is the same as a real estate agent in the US, and an estate agency the same as a real estate agency. Now, estate agents here in the UK do not participate in what we call the multiple listing service in the US. Multiple listing service means that any agent or agency that participates in it, pays to be part of a multiple listing service, shares the listings across the entire country, because all multiple listing services are typically connected. So that means you can go work with one specific agent and they can show you any property that you're interested in. That is very different here. Each agent has their own property, and you can't see any other properties unless that agent has it on his books or the agency has it on their books. So even if you're looking in the same town or the neighborhood, you will have to go to each individual agent. So that is a little different, right? The next thing I want you to know about is something called the guide price. So the guide price is just the price that the seller kind of wants. It's sort of like in an auction. They don't want the price to go below that. So let's say you're looking at a home, the seller says their guide price is $300,000. Does that mean you have to offer $300,000? No, you can still offer less if you want. But they have said this is the least we want to accept. So we'd really actually like more. Which is funny because there's also a term called offers over, which means the seller wants offers over $300,000. So they're kind of telling you, and I think that is a little more common in Scotland, but they're telling you, hey, we really want you to offer us, definitely over $300,000, and you're going to be competing with other people, so you better make it a good offer. Now, there's another term that's just kind of gone out of favor or is no longer legal, which is price on application. And basically, that says, ask us what the price is. And, if you can't afford it, maybe you shouldn't ask. But they've decided that isn't very transparent and it's kind of misleading. So that is no longer a legal term. So if you see it, you should definitely question it. Best and final offer is when you have properties that go, have multiple buyers interested in it, and they will go to sealed bids. So best and final means if they say, give us your best and final offer, you'll say, okay, that $300,000 house, I'm going to offer $350,000 for it. And you put that in a sealed bid. The seller says, we're going to look at sealed bids on such and such a date, and then we're going to decide which one we'll accept. So that leads me to the next term, which is gazumping. So if you put in an offer where there are multiple bids and you are outbid, you have been gazumped. And perhaps you put your best and final offer of £350,000. Somebody else came in at $360,000, so they gazumped you. Now, gazundering, which is, you don't hear that often, is when a buyer decides to offer less. So let's say maybe it's a slow market, or there's been a drop in market value between the time the contract started and the time it came around to finishing. And the buyer will say, you know what? I don't really want to pay you $300,000. I want to pay you $285,000. And then it's up to the seller to decide if they can or will accept that gazunder. The other big term here in the UK is a term called freehold. And I think that's probably not just unique to the United Kingdom, but probably Europe as well, although I'm not sure. But freehold means you own not only the building, but the land underneath it, or the land that it is built on. And I think this came about because of, royalty and all that sort of system where somebody else owned the land and then they allowed buildings to be built on it. So you won't see that very often at all in the US. That's pretty unheard of. But here it's pretty common. So freehold means you own the building and the land that it is built on. Leasehold, on the other hand, means you only own the building. Somebody else owns the land that your building is on, and you will likely have to pay them a ground rent for that land. Also, leasehold properties, which are typically flats and apartments, but they can be single-family dwellings, typically they have to have at least 99 years left on the lease for a mortgage company to give you a mortgage on it. The fewer years that are left on that lease, the harder it will be to get a mortgage. In fact, some mortgage companies simply won't give you a mortgage on anything with less than 99 years. So another term is a semi, and that is not referring to a type of milk. That is a semi-detached house, which are pretty common here in England. So that just means a house with a common wall with another house. Another term that you may not have heard of or you may have seen in ads is shared ownership. So a shared ownership scheme, and it's funny because scheme in the US is considered a bad thing. It's kind of like something a little fishy. Here a scheme refers to like a plan or a business plan. So the shared ownership scheme kind of says you can buy this house that you probably couldn't afford otherwise. You can get a mortgage on part of the house, and we will carry the mortgage or the carrying costs on the rest of it while you pay us rent on the rest of that value. So let's say we take that $300,000 house. You may get a mortgage on, let's say $100,000 of that, and then you pay rent on the balance of the $200,000 until it is paid off. The only problem with this is I did a little research when I was looking up these terms, and apparently only 2 to 3% of people actually ever get to pay off 100% of their homes under the shared ownership scheme. So it's kind of a questionable tactic. It's maybe tempting to get into a house that you couldn't afford otherwise, but I would definitely think twice about it. At least I would. Last but not least is a term called the snagging list, and that is primarily refers to a new build home. When you buy a new build home and you move in and you think, oh, this door is falling off or that needs fixing, that all goes on your snagging list. And those are things that you need to get fixed by the builder in order for you to be happy with your purchase and in order for them to kind of, take that off their list of things they need to do. So I hope those real estate terms were helpful if you're thinking of buying property here in the UK. If you're a US resident, you can buy a home in the UK. You may not be able to live in it, but you can buy a home in the UK even if you're not legally a resident. So that's all for now. Please put your comments and suggestions in the description box below, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye for now.